Hey, I really appreciate you guys coming by. Again, Chuck Bender, No BS Woodworking, Tuesday Tips, the very first episode. So, shocking, there are loads of bumps on the road. Um, we're gonna talk a little bit real quick about some concealed dovetails. These are fully hidden when you put the corner together. And I wanted to run through the process real quick of how I do it. So hopefully, between switching cameras and that kind of stuff, I don't lose even more. Stream is clipping. That's not fun. Yeah, I'm stuck on YouTube. I can't even talk. I can't even chat with everybody. So I'm going to close out my window because all that's doing is heating up bandwidth for no real reason. Alright, let's talk a little bit about full blind dovetails. The idea is when I put this corner together, we're going to have the dovetails on the inside of this holding the joint together, but from the outside it's going to look like it's mitered. And typically you would find this, most modern day cabinet makers, furniture makers try to incorporate this into straight bracket feet, OG bracket feet, that kind of stuff. And what I can tell you is, you know, there's a lot of people out there that believe that this is a common method of assembling bracket feet for pieces of furniture. But in all my years of working on antiques, I think I've only ever stumbled across one set of period feet that were full blind dovetails or completely concealed. So to me, when I look at it, it's a fun exercise more than anything. And we have to look at how the joint's going to go together, and then plan our process. So I'm going to try and switch cameras here, bring a camera in. This should make it loads of fun. Oh. Come on, you're right there. Hey, I didn't even switch the camera and it's already over there. It just knew what I wanted to do. Alright, so I've got my zoom in on what I have laid out here on the ends of my boards. So the first thing that I did, and I'll back up just a tiny bit, is I use my triangle marking system. That's a discussion for another day. I use my triangle marking system to label my two parts. And what you can see that I have drawn on the ends of the board here are the basic structure of the joint. So we're going to start off by making a two-cut rabbet. So first thing I did was set a marking gauge to the depth that I want the dovetails to go in. You can probably see this scribe line on here, especially if I darken it with a pencil like that. So that's the depth of the dovetail. This section up here is going to be the miter. So if I look at that, the first thing I need to do is go to either hand or power tools. Doesn't much matter to me. I did it on the table saw, and I created the first part of this rabbet. So what I did was I made a single cut with my table saw right along that line at approximately that depth. If I go like this, you might actually see, because now I have two of the same parts. So this depth comes up to that point, right? And then if I grab one of my others, once I got the first leg of the rabbet cut, the next thing I did was tilt my table saw over to 45 degrees, and I created a mitered rabbet. Okay, and I did that for both pieces. Both halves of my joint are identical, so the idea is to cut that same mitered rabbet on both pieces. Okay, so if I go back to that original drawing, you can see, I'm going to color in the other half of this. So this goes away, and then what's left, so this is all missing once I make the table saw cuts. And then this square on both halves becomes the area where the dovetails are going to be. So my dovetails are going to fit into this space. Hopefully you guys can see that. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to switch back over. Could it be that there's not enough bandwidth? So when I tested my internet connection this evening, I had far more bandwidth than I actually needed to run. I could run 5 or 6 streams, not just 2. That's kind of weird that they're both buffering. So I'm going to keep going for a little bit here, and if it becomes even worse or it doesn't get any better, then we'll try it again next Tuesday. Anyway, into this square space is where the dovetails are going to get cut. So once I have the rabbets cut and the miters on there, this is what I end up with. So what I need to do is do my layout for my dovetails. And if you guys have looked around on my YouTube channel, you probably saw a video that I did about pins or tails first. I am normally a pins first person. Something's up with I can't tell whether you can see anything or not. What I'm seeing on Instagram is one marking gauge. It doesn't even look like the parts are on there. Boy. Alright, let me see what I can do here. I'm really sorry. Again, this is why I didn't broadcast this to out all over social media trying to figure out what to do and how to do this, because I knew when it came time for the real thing, we would have some trouble. Okay, it says you can see, Shallow Creek says you can see better now. Alright, let's see. I'm going to see if I can. I don't know why that keeps coming up. I just want to switch cameras. Oh, it just did it. Okay, I have no idea what's going on anymore. I am completely out of control. Alright, let's see what we've got. Where they are now is perfect. That's awesome, but I've already switched back to the wide shot. Alright. I am... Oh, good. Now you've got the wide shot. And you can see my shoulder in the camera. This is lovely. It shouldn't be this hard. Well, clearly I have a few more bugs to work out with this thing. That's all I know. And I'm not sure what the difference is between the various modes. This is the first time that I went live. Everything I did over the weekend was private, so it wasn't available to a lot of people, and I'm wondering if some of that's dragging the whole system down a little bit. Oh. Thanks, Barry. Can you see? Alright. Yeah, I just can't join the chat for over there for some weird reason. All right. So we've been at this now for about 35 minutes. Again, I'm only seeing an area about this big on Instagram for some weird reason. I don't know what the difference is between live mode and practice mode. But on, wait a minute, I got a chat box over on YouTube. That's amazing. Yeah, YouTube's Yeah, you guys are doing pretty good over there. I can see. You guys have been chatting for a while here. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Here, John Kellerman says he can see me fine. All right. I'm happy. At least you guys are seeing me. Let's see if we can't sort of muscle our way through this. Okay, he says YouTube. Jay says YouTube is working better. How about if I just end the Instagram feed, and you guys can head on over to YouTube if you're not already there, and we will pick it up from there and see what we can do. I do apologize. I just want to make sure that, you know, what I'm doing is actually being seen. I don't really want to be doing this and focused on the technical aspects of it. I want to be doing the woodworking part of it. So I'm gonna end Instagram, and then since YouTube is getting the broader view, I'll pick it up over there. All right. Let's see what we've got here. Hopefully you guys are... Now I've lost my chat box again. Alright, let's see if we've caught up. Ah, there it goes. Just sitting here watching it buffer for some weird reason. All right. Hopefully that all right, YouTube seems fine, and nobody really cares about the Knicks, Bob, at all. All right, let's just see if I can't muscle my way through this, and we'll get it laid out and see if we can't cut a few dovetails. So I'm going to go back to the close-up camera, and hopefully YouTube catches up here pretty quick. I agree with Zoltan and John Wayne. I think it's Instagram's problem, and I think we're going to ditch it for next week. We'll just stick on YouTube and go that way. I was really trying to get both feeds in because I think there are people that lean one way or the other more so than not. So I'm going to stick with this. Hopefully you guys are... Hopefully the video and the audio are syncing. You're not hearing me speak several minutes ahead of the video. So we'll... Instagram is down. Yeah, I ended the Instagram feed because I thought that was the one that was giving me the trouble. All right. hopefully YouTube catches up, although right now it looks like it's frozen on my end. Wait, there we go. Oh, you guys do have the close-up shot. Alright. So now that I've got the rabbeted miters, or the mitered rabbets as it were, marked out here. Oh, I forgot. One of the things that I wanted to do was, before I cut all of those, I have 2 marking gauges set. And the idea was to have one that was set to the depth that we were going to, this is where the dovetails are going to go. But I also needed a second one that was set to the full thickness of my material. And what this one's not marked out for some reason. I do have one that is. So I'm just going to mark it real quick. So this scribe line that you're seeing here is from the end of the board to the scribe line, which is the same thickness. So if I line up that inside surface of my one board with that scribe line, the outside should fall flush with the end of that miter. And the idea here is, again, my dovetails are going to go into the flat section of the rabbet here. And what I want to do is, this is one time, you know, if you guys have seen me at a show, watched my videos, I talk about the fact that it really doesn't matter which part you cut first, the pins or the tails, because whichever part you cut first becomes the pattern for the second half of your dovetail. But in this case, I find it nearly impossible to cut tails first. So I'm going to lay out my pins. So the first thing I'm going to do is stand my board up in the vise. And then I'll zoom in here a little bit so you guys can see what's going on. And hopefully this catches up with me. Angle is fairly irrelevant, so I picked something that I liked, right? And what I'm going to do, we want the narrow part of the pin towards the corner in this miter. So I'm going to draw a half pin on one side, flip my gauge over, draw a half pin on the other side, find my middle and come out a little on either side of that and draw a full pin right in the middle. This is my waist right here. Okay. Try and bring the camera a little closer so you can see the layout. Alright, so 2 full-size tails, 2 half pins, and a central pin. There are 2 ways to cut this set of dovetails. I can just cut and chop out those pin sockets and leave this corner intact. If I do that, I gain the strength of those 2 half pins. Okay? If I decide that I want this to look like a mitered box instead of just getting the strength of the dovetails into that miter joint, I'm going to see if I can't get my camera to stay. Lock it a little harder. then what I'm going to need to do is extend that miter across that top, which essentially makes this half pin completely ineffective, right? So if that's my plan, then what I need to do is modify my layout so that I have a half tail and a half tail, or I need another full pin here and another full pin here, something to give this joint some kind of strength. But for tonight's demo, I'm just going to stick with the, say we're making this into a bracket foot where you're not going to see the top or the bottom. So this way I can do my layout the way I have. I could stretch those lines down. I'm going to clamp this thing down to my workbench, and then I'll move the camera so that you guys can see what I'm doing here. This will be a fun video to edit when it's all done. Alright. So I've just got my material held down with a hold fast. I probably ought to throw a little something else on there to stop it from sliding around. So we're gonna throw a clamp there. And now the idea is just saw them out. Now, and you're gonna treat these just like half-blind dovetails. So if you don't like the idea of oversawing this baseline for your half-blinds, then what I'm going to say is don't do it. What it means is you're going to have a lot more to chop out. If I go back to that drawing section that I had, right? If I saw from this point to that point, you can see I'm only removing 50% of the waste. Straight edge, it'll be easier to illustrate. So if I continue and I just connect the 2 points, what I've got is 50% of that area where the dovetails are is what I'm sawing free. If I oversaw my baseline by even 3/4 of an inch, oops, look at the difference in the amount of material that I've removed. Pardon me. So clearly oversawing that baseline is going to remove a lot more of the waste before you even get started. All right, so let me see. All right. Just checking comments. The video and the audio are syncing fine, which is kind of scary because that means you guys are behind me. All right. So what I'm going to do while you guys catch up is I'm going to grab a couple of chisels and I'm going to start to remove that waste. You can see when I clamp this down to the bench using the hold fast, what I did was I got it set so that my baseline is right at the edge of my bench. This way when I start to chop down, I have lots of support for all of that chopping I'm going to do. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my chisel and peel up that first layer of fibers, like I do with all of my dovetails, and give me a nice little shoulder to set my chisel against when I start to do the chopping. Alright, so if I peel up a little there, peel up a little here, now I can take the chisel, set it right up against that shoulder, tilt a little past 90 degrees, and chop down. And because I created that tiny little shoulder using my marking gauge line to sever those fibers, what that means is I don't know if you get it on camera or not, but I'm not being gentle with this. So now I can take some good solid wax, sever a lot of fibers. I'm going to go into the corner here, sever the fibers that are going off with the dovetail real quick. And then I'll take my wider chisel and I'll start to remove that waste. And just like I do on half blinds, I tilt the chisel over and I very carefully remove each corner and then come back and take out the center. Okay, then I can go back in and chop a little more. Angle. Carefully work up that waste. Alright. Ease it out of there. You don't want to break off the corners here. The great thing about fully concealed dovetails, if you break off the corner or you have some gaps, there is no one in the world that is ever going to be able to see it anyway. So that should come as a relief to a bunch of you guys I know. Alright. Keep going. I know it's like watching paint dry, isn't it? Come on out of there. And what I'm going to do is go down until I'm about a 1/16 maybe away from my corner there. And then eventually here we'll stand this up. That's a big chunk. Try to take, there we go. Knock it out of there. Knock this corner out. Take out the middle. Take out a little more there because I've got about 1/8 of an inch. And then my last thing I'm going to do, just like if I'm doing half blinds, I'm going to take a chop cut here and sever some more fibers, and then I'm going to stand it up and clean up the sockets. And again, I'll move the camera so you guys can see what's going on. Alright. Stand it up in the vise. Move the camera. And by severing those fibers at the baseline here, what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to go to a wider chisel. The wider the chisel, the straighter the line. So I can bring it right down to where that miter meets the horizontal portion of that. And I can just tap that and take that material right out. The great thing is that miter really functions as a pretty good stop. It functions almost like the shoulder that I created on the bottom there, so that I can just set the chisel right into place, gently tap it, and flick that material right out of there. That one I could have gone a little deeper on my chop cut. I can tell because the fibers are giving me a little bit tougher time here trying to sever them and take them out of the process. I will check comments here in just a minute, and hopefully by that point the video will catch up a little bit. So this first half doesn't matter whether I set myself up. You know, if I stick to my lines, great. If I don't, it really doesn't matter, because I'm going to transfer this. Like I said, this becomes the pattern. So you can see when I laid it out, I didn't spend a whole lot of time measuring. You can do as much of that stuff as you like, but honestly, it really doesn't matter whether my tails are perfectly the same size or not. Again, nobody's going to see this in the end, as long as the joint kind of holds together. I mean, this is the ultimate practical joint. As long as it's got some hold, you're never going to be able to tell whether there are minor or major gaps in there anywhere. So as long as you put it together and it doesn't fall apart instantly, you can tell all your friends that they're the best dovetails you ever cut, and they will never know. Alright, let's see. So I've got the sockets cleaned out fairly well. Gonna try and zoom in a little. I'll check some comments, give you guys a second to catch up. Oh, good. Awesome. No real comments to catch up on. So I was worried you guys were asking all kinds of questions and I was ignoring them. Now I know I'm not ignoring them. You guys just aren't asking them. All right. Time for the second half. And I'll see if I can run through that pretty quickly here, because some of you have been hanging out for an hour, and that's longer than I wanted these segments to be. I do appreciate your patience. A little bit more cleanup there, but it's looking pretty good. Alright, so if I take that piece and I head back over to the bench, and I line up my triangle marking system, Right, so I got my two triangle sections there. My pin board has to sit on top of my tail board, and I have to transfer these surfaces to that board. If I had cut my tails first in this instance, this would be the opening that I would have on each end. So about a quarter, maybe 3/8, and another quarter or so on the other side. I'll get it down where you can actually see it. So, and I would have to get a pencil or a marking knife into that space in order to transfer those sides of the tails over onto my pin board. So that's why I like to cut my pins first in this instance, because when I lay this stuff out, look at all the space I have to get in here. I like to use a pencil. If you guys have come to a class or seen me at a show, that's what you're gonna know. That's my whole thing, is I like the pencil because it tells me how close I am to my line. Good sharp pencil. I'm gonna remark this since this is the one I forgot to mark the baseline on initially, and it looks like my baseline is, the scribe mark is slightly lower than the actual, the marking gauge line is lower than the actual surface of my piece. So don't forget to mark that before you cut your rabbets and your miters. I'm going to lock this down, see if I can't get it all on camera. And what that means is when I go to cut these and then chop out the waste, I'm going to have a little extra work to do because I'm not going to be able to use that baseline like I did on my pin board. So I'm going to put this up against my stop, lock that down, and then I'll grab my saw and I'll show you. These I'm not going to overcut that baseline, although once again, because this is the inside surface of something that we're making, you know, if I stick with my example here and say it's a bracket foot of some sort, oversawing those baselines doesn't matter because it's the inside of the foot, right? So I'm going to shift around a little bit so that I'm not whacking the camera with my arm or the saw. And what I want to do is split my line in half. And saw down there. Saw down here. I'm going to have to move the camera again. Sorry. Try and come up there a little bit. Could have also moved my hold fast a little bit off the end of this board. All right. So if we look at that, all I've done is saw from this baseline over to that baseline, and now I have to remove the waste on this section, and that section. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my chisel. Normally I would peel back to my scribe line, but like I said, when I pulled this one up and I hadn't marked it before, somehow I get that out of the way so I'm not chiseling into a clamp. Somehow I used the wrong gauge, or well, I had already cut the miter on this, the rabbet and the miter on this, and my gauge was sticking in a little too far. So I'm going to start by re-establishing my baseline to what I marked off of my pin board. Take a light chop And now, if I grab a better chisel, I can create that shoulder like I did on my pin board by peeling up a layer or 2 or 20 of fibers. And now I can chop these outside ones. I don't want to undercut at all. I want to keep my chisel right at 90 degrees, because if I undercut this when you assemble it, you're going to have a big funky gap there. So I'm going to chop the 2 outsides. The middle one I can actually undercut by 4 or 5 degrees. Knock the waste out. Here you don't have to do the angle thing because the sockets aren't angling. They're angling horizontally, not vertically, so use a narrow chisel. After I've established the flat line, because I get deeper penetration out of the narrow chisel than I do with, and because than I do with a wide chisel. Now, because I only sawed from baseline to baseline, I need to sever some fibers in this corner, both across the grain and kind of with the grain. So when I chop down this way with the grain, I want to be very, very careful, because it's easy to split the part of this that I want to keep. Get down to about 1/16 of an inch away, and then I can pare that in. I've still got to clean up that very corner. Oop. Oh well, knock the corner out of there. Once again, as long as the joint holds, who is ever going to really know? Alright. Almost there. Tiny little bit of cleanup here to do at the end. And then we'll see if these things go together. Because to be honest with you, I don't think I've actually cut a set of full blinds or fully concealed dovetails probably in at least 10 years. There just isn't a whole lot of call for it. It's a lot of work for something that is completely hidden and kind of looks like a miter joint in the end, when you can just do a miter joint. The big difference is this has a lot more mechanical hold than you get out of a miter joint, so while it's a miter joint is good, and you can dramatically increase the strength of that without too much effort. And I don't necessarily mean using splines and stuff like that. I mean, you can work with what you have and make a much stronger miter joint. Loosen that up. Let's stand it up in the vise. Move the camera. See if there's anything left to clean up here in the corners. That's looking pretty good. I'm postponing the moment of truth here. Alright. So if I lay my... I'm going to back up a little bit. There we go. Ooh. Catch him right there. Alright, not so bad. I'm got a little bit open on my miter. And if I bring that camera in a little bit tighter, you'll actually be able to see that opening on the miter. And then you'll be able to see why. So I'm bumping right in this corner. So I've come across, so somewhere in there I didn't quite get my 45s at a 45. So the way I'm going to have to correct this is to take the joint apart and then start to modify that miter just a little bit with a chisel, or head back over to the table saw and tilt it over. The weird thing was, when I set it up, instead of doing it the way I normally do, I actually used a Wixie to get my 45s, and my 45 is not quite 45 off the Wixie. So what that's telling me is, go back to the way that I've always done it, which is, you set a 45 gauge on there and check it against the blade and do that instead of that wacky digital thing. So looks like on YouTube we're getting pretty close to the end here. We're talking about the miter. Shocking. Alright, so I'm going to switch back to my wide shot, if I can figure out how. Let's go over to this. Well, that was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, folks. I do appreciate everyone's patience with the first half hour, give or take, of this nonsense. Hopefully next week, I think what I'll do is I'll send out another email, maybe two, as a reminder. Next week, what I'd really like to do is, I am a real fan of a relatively new tool that has come out, and I used it here in the shop for one of my classes last fall, and we did some really cool jigs and things, and it was a super help getting everything laid out, cut, and fitted with absolute perfect precision. And what I'd like to do next week is show you a little bit of this funky, as one person called it who was in the class, this funky animated jig that I made. So it's a moving jig that allows me to cut perfect arcs, for specific arcs for a project that we did. So I will send out an email again, and hopefully next time we're going to stick with the YouTube channel. That seemed to be the one that I had the least amount of trouble with. Let's get it established. Let's get the Tuesday Tips established, working on YouTube, and if it's, if I can keep playing with the technology and figure out why Instagram was giving me so much trouble. It's the one that I would have started this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and Instagram was giving me a massive amount of trouble then. And when I finally got it working 100% over the weekend, I was like, awesome, let's roll. And we went live, and I was right back to where square one on this. So YouTube didn't seem to have too much trouble doing the live thing from the beginning. That was always the easiest one to connect to and the best one to stream from for me. So what I'm going to say is I will send out another email or two reminding you that next Tuesday we're going to try it again, hopefully with far less pain and suffering on both our parts. I do thank you for coming out. Thank you for hanging out. Hopefully there were at least a few little tips in there. I think next week you'll see that we'll get even more refined, because I'll be far less focused on the technology aspect of it and more on the tips and the techniques that we're going to go. And I've got a ton of really great ideas to do around the shop here over the course of the next 6 months to a year. So hopefully I'll see you pretty regularly on Tuesday nights, and we'll go from there. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week. I'm going to check YouTube one last time. What type of wood am I using? Yes, poplar. Before I completely sign off, are these recorded and can we watch them later? Supposedly the answer is yes. And I think that's it. Alright. Thank you guys again for joining me. I really appreciate it. And we will try this again next week, solely on YouTube until such a time comes as I can figure out what the hiccups are with Instagram. Thanks. See ya.